You're probably watching this in the future, but in case you're watching live, Merry Christmas Eve. I thought I'd do a little code today before spending time with family this evening and tomorrow. We're building this stocks and finance app together, and it's time to pull in some real data. In our last episode, we bootstrapped an Apollo GraphQL server in Node and TypeScript, and we created a very simple GraphQL query where you can query hello and you get back world. Today we'll create a mutation that allows us to provide a stock ticker symbol and actually get real stock data back. And we'll create the schema and the resolvers for that mutation. So let's jump in. Before we get going on that specific task, I do a little housekeeping from last episode. I couldn't figure out why my Nodemon wouldn't restart actually when I was saving my files. Turns out that, figured out live afterwards, Nodemon only listens to .js files by default. If you are doing TypeScript, then you need to add some extensions for what you want to listen to. So you can add this ext command line argument with your TypeScript extensions. All right, so in order to create our mutation and actually pull back data, we're going to use the IEX Cloud data API service to pull this data back. And they have a JavaScript library that we can use called IEX. And so let's go ahead and pull this in and build our mutation at the same time. So I'm going to copy this, and we'll come into our code and we'll do a npm install and add this package. Okay, great. This is added. Let's follow their example here. Make sure I'm not blocking this. Follow their example here, and you can see they have get a real-time stock quote. So we're initializing a client that is connecting to the IEX service. We're needing to provide it a token, so we'll go over how to add tokens in your code. And we're querying a quote and getting back some result. So let's copy this in as a starting point. Right now, probably I'll just work in one file, and we'll break this up either as we go or a little later on. So let's do this here. We're going to create a client. Let's move this require statement up as an import above. So let's just move this above. And we'll say import client from applet IEX.js. Now already we have red squiggly lines. Let's check that out. It's showing that it can't find a declaration file, so it can't find the typings for this library. Now, 9 times out of 10, or maybe 99 times out of 10, you can run this recommended install to load from a community-supported definitely typed project to load the typings for this library. So let's run this and see if those typings are available. So we'll do npm install, save dev, and it says that it can't find this package. So that means both within this package, there aren't built-in type definitions, but there also aren't community-supported types for this package. This is an extreme rarity because most of the time you're going to be using something that either has types built in or it's community-supported. So in this case, your options are to either build out the typings yourself. We're not going to do that right off the bat. Or let's just create a basic typings file that just basically says that this returns any and allows us to move on without this error and red squiggly. So let's go and create in the root of our project a typings.d.ts file. And let me pull this to the side. So we're going to declare module And then in quotes, we'll declare apparet/IEX.js. And there we go. So now we need to make sure that this typings file is loading. So let's open up our tsconfig package. And let's go ahead and add, we're including everything in source. I want to go ahead and add this typings file at the root of our project. Okay, so this is resolving. Now, I happen to know that this is probably going to cause an issue when we start a server. So I'm going to Control-C out of my server, which is running below, and I'm going to start this again. And we're going to get this really cryptic error that it still can't find the typings for this, even though VS Code is reporting no red squigglies. What's the deal here? Well, we are using tsnode to run our project. And tsnode doesn't happen to load up all the files automatically upon startup. So there is this interesting option that we can provide called tsnode, and then we're going to say, I think it's files true. And what this does, kind of weird, what this does is it just loads the files right at the get-go. So let's try running this again, and we should be able to see that at least the typings error went away. We're getting other errors, that's okay, but the typings error went away. So this little option here actually is the reason I'm redoing this stream, because I got stumped on this on my last attempt. So we're loading our typings file. We have a very basic typings file. It's not actually declaring typing, it's just saying we know this exists. So now we can move on. Next up, let us figure out how we can actually run this query and continue on here. So let's work on adding in our API token. Now, I am using just a trial version of IEX Cloud, so you can sign up for a trial of this, try for free. And when you do that, you go to the dashboard. So I think I can do that here. And it will fetch your API tokens. Now, I'm not going to show you my secret token, but I will show you where it is. So it is right here, and that's where you get your secret token. So we want to be able to put this secret token right here in our API token, but we definitely do not want to commit this to our Git repo. So we don't actually want to put it in the code itself. So what we can do is we'll create a .env file. And this is a common approach to adding environment variables and using environment variables in your code. So let's say we want to create an environment variable. Maybe it's called, to access environment variables, we'll say process.env dot. So let's create an environment variable called IEX API token. So let's then take this and we'll put this in our .env file equals, and then we're going to paste in our API token there. Now, to make sure that we're still not committing this to our Git repository, I'm also going to add to our .getignore file, and I'm going to bring up my source control tab here in VS Code, and we can see it's wanting to commit the .env file to our Git repository. We don't want that. So let's add in a line here that says, let's ignore .env files. So now the .env file you can see is not showing up as a change in our Git kind of status area over here. So we know that it's not going to commit. So I'm going to pull this off screen for just a little bit, momentarily, while I copy in that token, paste, save, and close the file. So there we go. So I've copied in my secret envar, and we can have that accessible here. But by default, Node doesn't load this .env file for you. But there is a great package called, it's actually called .env. So let's do ghub.io. This is a really quick and easy way to get to the GitHub repository for a given package. And we're going to type in .dot env. So this will bring us to the .env package that allows you to load up environment variable keys and values from a .env file. Super handy package for development. So let's install this in our repo. So pnpm I'm going to do capital D to save it to dev dependencies, and we'll save this to our repository. Okay, so now let's follow the instructions here to get this loading. So they have a couple different ways. We can either call an import statement or call a requirement statement. I'm just going to start with the require. So I'm going to put this above my imports. I'm doing this because it looks weird, and I actually want to call it out because I need to load it kind of before everything else to make sure everything's accessible here. So I'm going to leave that as is. Okay, here we go. Now let's continue on. So client quote, so we're calling to get Apple here, and then we are returning some result. So let's create a function for this. So let's create a function called getQuote. And we're going to say symbol, if I can spell symbol, is a string, and then we are going to return something. So let's move our example code up in here. And I'm going to use promises instead of .thens. And we will return this result. So we will return, we will just return this statement here. That sounds good. Now we have created a simple function for getQuote here. However, I don't really know what this is returning. So I want to kind of try this out. Well, this is a good time to, let's go ahead and start our mutation. And then I can use our GraphQL server here, our sandbox, and use this to call this function and try out a couple different things. So up here in our type defs, this is where we're creating our GraphQL schema. And we're going to create our very first mutation. So let's say type mutation, and I'm going to say, let's create a mutation called quote. And we can pass that some variables. So in our parentheses here, we'll say a symbol is a string, and this is required. And then we will return something. Now, we don't quite know what client.quote returns. So what if I just wanted to return a JSON blob here? Well, what if we created a type that is called JSON, and that just returns any old JSON blob? So that's pretty interesting. There is yet another package called GraphQL type JSON. Yes. And what this does is it offers up a type that is called JSON, which just allows you to return a JSON blob. So let's, not really a blob, I guess, a JSON object. So let's install this package so that we can get this type in our GraphQL. So I'll do pnpm install and install this package. Now let's use this package. So let's use an import as such. And let's take a look at their example. So in their example, we are defining what's called a scalar. A scalar is a custom type that is not like a GraphQL type with fields. So a scalar might be a date time, JSON, things like that. Things that aren't just a plain old string or number that you would want to create your own like value scalar type of. So we need to declare scalar JSON, and then we can use that in our code, but we also need to make sure that we have a resolver that comes from this GraphQL type JSON package. So let's set this up real fast. So I have on my clipboard the example here, so GraphQL type JSON. Let's see, cannot find module. I bet it can't. Let's see, GraphQL type JSON. We did add it. Let's see if that resolves itself here momentarily. So let's do scalar JSON. And then in our resolvers, let's add JSON and use this GraphQL JSON resolver that comes with our new package. Now this is saying it can't find GraphQL type JSON. I did install that. We'll see, maybe it doesn't come with the type declarations. So let's try starting up our server and seeing what happens here. Okay, it is starting, but we're getting a few errors here. So one is an unrecognizable API version. So we didn't quite finish our client setup here, I guess. We need to pass some version. So let's look at the IEX package, and let's see what versions they have in here. It looks like in their example, they are passing a v1 as the version. So let's do that. And we'll try starting again. And we are starting up. So my VS Code may just be a little bit behind here. Sometimes that happens. It gets a little cranky. Okay, so we have a scalar, JSON scalar type. We can now return just any old JSON object from this mutation. So we have our schema ready for this mutation. Now let's create a resolver. So we'll come in here and we'll say mutation. And this is where we will declare our resolvers for our mutations. So we'll say quote, and then this quote will take a function. And we'll go over those arguments. And then it will return something. So the query and mutation function arguments are actually the same. The first argument is what would be passed in from a parent resolver. So if you look at GraphQL, this ends up being a tree of various things that you can end up calling. And so each one of these will call resolver, resolver, resolver. So as child resolvers get called, it passes in the parent. But for your top level mutation or a top level query, nothing really gets passed in here. So we're going to ignore this with an underscore. Next up are the arguments that get passed in. In our case, we're declaring an argument of symbol. So we'll go ahead and create a symbol argument here. And I'm going to manually type this symbol as that we're expecting a string. But in another episode, we will actually generate the TypeScript types based upon our GraphQL schema here, so we don't have to do that manually. And then this goes on. There's a context object that gets passed in, but we won't be using that now. So now we have our mutation, or the resolver that will get called with this, and we're passing in a symbol. Now we can use our getQuote function, and we'll just return getQuote here. So getQuote, and we'll pass in our symbol. And we don't really know what this is going to return, but we can return any JSON object here, and we'll be good. So let me save this. And let me save this. Let me run pnpm dev. That will run my Nodemon to automatically watch for changes. So it'll restart when I save. Okay, so I'm saving and it's restarting. Perfect. So if I go to my GraphQL sandbox here, this is running on my local host, then I can run a mutation, And inside of this mutation, I have a mutation called quote. So when I hit enter here to autocomplete, it automatically creates a variable for me. So it's created a variable called symbol, which is a string that's required. That's the exclamation point. And it's passing in that symbol variable as the symbol argument to my quote mutation. So I can either put my variable down here or I can hard code it in my query. So let's just put it down here. So let's say we wanted to pull some stock information on Apple. So if I run this, hey, it ran the first time. That's amazing. Okay, so if I run this, then I'm getting all of the information back from IEX. This is pretty cool. So it returns things like the change for the past day, trading day, the change percentage, company name, currency, lots of different things here, which is pretty cool. Market cap, lots of things. Hi, Dr. Mohammed. Thanks for joining. Lots of cool things here. So what we could do is we could create our own type, GraphQL type, that we would want to return here. So let's say that we just wanted to return a few of these attributes. And we want those to be usable here in our GraphQL mutation. So let's say we wanted to return maybe the change percent. We'll return the company name, symbol, and maybe we just start with that. So let's create an actual GraphQL return value that's not just any old JSON object. So for this, we'll just create a new type. So we'll say type is a quote result. And we may end up renaming this later on, but we'll adjust. So instead of returning a JSON, we'll return a type of quote result. And the fields that are available in quote result will be here. So let's say I'm going to copy in some of these and then we'll adjust. I just want to get the field names in here. So change percent. I like company name. That's good. What else do we want in here? Let's say we've got low, high, market cap, PE ratio is nice. Let's do that. And we'll do symbol as well. Oh, and let's see, I think we don't have I think I skipped over the price. Let's see, calculation price. Let's see, delayed price. PE ratio. Okay, let's do delayed price. They're very explicit about that this is not live. And let's maybe do the previous close so we can see what it previously closed as. So this is obviously not how you would type something out. I just wanted to get the keys in here. So let me remove these quotes and get these keys in here. So number, string, number. Okay. So we want to create a type of quote result that has all of these things. So this change is going to be a float. So it's not just a number in GraphQL. In JavaScript and TypeScript, you just have numbers, and they can be integers, floats, all sorts of things. But in GraphQL, you can actually type it to be either an integer or a float. There's actually not just a generic number, to my knowledge. So we're going to say float. Both of these things are floats. Company name would be a string. And I am ending all these in an exclamation point, assuming that these are going to be available in all results. PE ratio will be a float. Symbol will be a string. Delayed price will be a float. And previous close will be a float. So now if I save this, this is going to adjust what is available when we run this quote mutation. So if I just come in here and try to run this again, I'm going to get an error because now that this is returning a custom type, GraphQL type, I need to specify what are the attributes I want to return. So now if I do control space, then I get all of the different attributes that are available to return on this quote. So let's say we want to return the symbol, the company name, the price, we'll just return everything. Change percent, PE ratio. Excellent, sounds good. So if I run this again, you can run it with Command Enter on a Mac. Then I get all of these things in here. And you'll notice I didn't change my mutation. I didn't change my resolver. I'm still returning the entire object that getQuote returns, which is that larger JSON object. But here in my GraphQL, it's only returning the specific fields that I'm specifying in my query. So for instance, if I took out PE ratio or maybe commented it out and reran this query, then it wouldn't return PE ratio in my result. And so in GraphQL, you can limit the amount of data you're transferring over the wire or over the air. And also make sure that you're not exposing any data unnecessarily. So that looks pretty good. I like this as a first go at this. We've gotten some good functionality in here. And so we created our first mutation. We're using variables here in our mutation, fields as it's called, and then created a custom type for this quote result. We added in GraphQL type JSON. We're ignoring those red squigglies for now. Those will go away. We pulled in the apret IEX library. We created our generic typings file for that. And we're utilizing process, where'd it go? Process.env, as well as our .in file to use environment variables securely in our code without committing those to our Git repository. So I think that will do it for this episode, and I will see you in the next one as we continue on building our stocks and finance app. Have a good one.